Number 6. Robert Hansen. The next serial killer also has ties to Alaska. Robert Hansen, aka the Butcher Baker, had a minimum of 21 victims. Many other cold cases that are suspected to be linked to him. Like many others on this list, Hansen was said to have a hard childhood. Namely, he was said to be shy, had bad acne, and stutter. For the cruel treatment he suffered growing up, Hansen wanted revenge. He seemed to distance himself from his old life as he grew into adulthood. He would leave his hometown state of Iowa, join the military, and eventually open a bakery in Anchorage, Alaska. Although he appeared to be just a simple, humble baker, Hansen clearly had a darker side that he concealed from members of his community. Throughout the 70s and early 80s, Hansen would prey on sex workers and dancers. He would bring his victims to his cabin and set them loose in the dense Alaskan wilderness. Then, after giving them some time to run and hide, he'd hunt them like they were animals. Fortunately for one of his victims, she was able to get away. She was found running frantically down the street, handcuffed and barefoot. She was picked up and safely returned home. She went to the police and told them that she escaped while Hansen was preparing the plane he was planning to load her into and fly to his cabin. She provided a description of him, mentioned his stutter, and identified his plane. Although Hansen fit what she said perfectly, police were still hesitant to bring him in, as he was considered a beloved member of the community. When approached by the police, Hansen said that he did know her, but she was setting him up because she didn't want to pay the large fee she charged for her services. A friend of his backed this up, and he was released. However, as more women started to disappear, the FBI got involved. Eventually, a profile of the killer was developed, which, of course, Hansen fit to the T. They said he was an avid hunter, had low self-esteem, and a stutter with a history of being rejected by women. After obtaining search warrants, Hansen's home, plane, and car were searched. Of note, they found a map marked with 24 tiny X's, some of which matched the locations where bodies were found. They also discovered jewelry, which were said to be the souvenirs that he kept from the victims. In 1984, Hansen confessed to killing 17 women. He was sentenced to 461 years plus life without the possibility of parole. He died while in custody in 2014. Number 7. Tex Watson. Charles Tex Watson was a central member of the Manson family led by Charles Manson. He, along with 2 female cult members, killed the pregnant actress Sharon Tate and 4 others on August 9, 1969 in Los Angeles. The next night, Watson, this time with 6 other members of the cult, traveled to the Los Feliz neighborhood and killed Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. In October 1969, Watson reportedly knew that the cops were after him, and he fled to Texas, his home state. However, on November 30, 1969, he was arrested. He was eventually extradited to California, after which he is said to refuse talking and eating. As a result, he lost 55 pounds and began regressing to a catatonic state. He was admitted to a hospital for 90 days, but was found competent to stand trial after that. Following his trial in 1971, Watson was convicted of killing 7 people: Tate, her unborn child, the 4 others in her home, and the LaBiancas. He was also convicted of 1 count of conspiracy to murder. He was sentenced to death, but after the passing of People v. Anderson, all Californian death sentences imposed prior to 1972 were invalidated. Number 8. Sean Great. Again, like so many on this list, killer Sean Great was said to have a troubled childhood. His mother left the family when he was 11, and he was said to be depressed as a teenager. In total, Great killed a minimum of 5 people, including 2 of his ex-girlfriends and 3 other women in Ohio between 2006 and 2016. As to his 2 ex-girlfriends, Great wrote a letter to a news station claiming the motives for the crimes were the government assistance that took his victims' minds. Great was arrested on September 13, 2016. He entered a plea of not guilty, but later pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. However, after psychological assessments, it was determined that he was sane. The story is a little confusing from there, but Great was found guilty or pleaded guilty to his crimes, and he was sentenced to death. As of now, his execution is scheduled for March 19, 2025. The method of his execution is still undetermined. as lethal injection isn't used in the state anymore, but the law does not currently allow for any other method to be used. Number 9, the Doodler. Between 1974 to 1975, this unidentified serial killer is thought to have killed between 6 to 16 people. 3 people were lucky enough to live. He was given the nickname of the Doodler, aka the Black Doodler, because he would draw his victims before killing them. It is said that he would target homosexual men. He was also said to be a black man between 19 and 25 years old, 6 feet tall, and with a slender build. Police questioned a man as a murder suspect in the case, but the 3 surviving victims did not want to out themselves by participating in court proceedings. The man never admitted to the killings, but police thought it was highly likely that he was the one responsible. To date, no one has been apprehended or named publicly. Number 10, the River City Ripper. Another unidentified killer, but this one committed crimes much more recently than the Doodler. The River City Ripper killed 3 people and wounded another between 2020 and 2021 in Little Rock, Arkansas. According to the surviving victim, he appeared to be young, black, slenderly built, and over 6 feet tall. His last known killing was in April 2021. All of his victims were strangers and walking alone between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. It is believed that the perpetrator of the kidnappings is still roaming the streets to this day. Number 11, Gary Ridgway. Here's yet another killer with the word river in his epithet. However, this one, unlike the previous, had been apprehended and punished for his crimes. You can't tell by looking at the former bedwetting, low IQ having man, who, as of his trial, was middle-aged and mustachioed. But Gary Ridgway, also known as the Green River Killer, is actually the country's second most prolific serial killer. Ridgway confessed to killing 71 people from 1982 to 1998, although he wasn't apprehended until 2001, which is the year some people believe he stopped killing. Of those, he was only convicted of committing 49. It's speculated that he may have actually killed up to 90 people or more. Most of his victims were teenage girls and women in the state of Washington. He was given his nickname based on the river in which his first 5 victims were found, the Green River. He was finally arrested on November 30th, 2001, outside of the truck factory he worked at after DNA linked him to the murder of 4 individuals. He escaped death by signing a plea deal and agreeing to disclose the location of some of the bodies that were still missing. He instead was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Ridgway may be remembered most, besides for his crimes, of course, for the confession he made to psychologists about his sexual attraction to his mother and his fantasies about killing her. He is currently 73 years old. Number 12, Jeffrey Dahmer. No list of prolific serial killers is complete without the infamous Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer plagued the streets of Milwaukee, Wisconsin between 1978 to 1991. During that time, he is said to have killed 17 men and boys. However, he was only convicted of 15 killings out of 16 that occurred in Washington. The treatment he received as a child is hotly contested. Some say that he was neglected, while others say that he was doted on by both parents. But whatever way he was treated, he recalled feeling uneasy with the solidity of his family, as his parents argued a lot. He also became obsessed with animals as a child, a typical trait amongst future killers. Turns out he was right to question the strength of his parents' relationship. They divorced in 1978, coincidentally the same year in which Dahmer committed his first murder. He had just graduated high school 3 weeks before the incident. At the urge of his father, Dahmer joined the army, but his penchant for drinking alcohol deemed him unsuitable for his service. He was discharged in 1981. Dahmer's murder streak resumed during his late 20s and early 30s. Most of his targets were black, but he seemed to also go after men who were indigenous, Asian, or Latino. He initially came in contact with most of his victims in or around gay bars. Throughout that time, Dahmer was known to rent out rooms in hotels or bring men back to his grandma's house. However, after she kicked him out, he rented a 1-bedroom apartment. But 2 days after the move-in, he was arrested for having inappropriate relations with a minor. He pleaded guilty to those related charges, but he was released from custody. So the murders continued. By May 14, 1990, Dahmer moved out of his grandma's house and into an apartment again. Within 1 week of moving, he killed his 6th victim. Dahmer was eventually apprehended on July 22, 1991. One of his victims had managed to get away from his apartment and was able to flag a police officer down. Officers accompanied him back to the apartment where they eventually find evidence of the horror Dahmer had inflicted. On July 25, 1991, he was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. By August, he was charged with 11 additional killings. Questions about Dahmer's sanity were raised and argued during the proceedings, but it was ultimately decided that he could stand trial. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he could not live out that much time. On November 28, 1994, he was killed by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, in prison. Number 13, the Alphabet Killer, New York. The Alphabet Killer was named as such because all his victims had first and last names that began with the same letter: Carmen Colon, Wanda Walkowitz, and Michelle Mazzina. Aside from the commonality, the 3 victims were all female children between 10 and 11, considered to be on the short side of their age, and were found in Rochester, New York. Their murders took place between November 16, 1971 and November 26, 1973. The only evidence of who the Alphabet Killer might be is a composite drawing of a man seen in one of the victims, Mazzina, prior to her death, that was created and distributed. The murders of the 3 children sparked national public outrage. There have been many people that authorities have suspected to be guilty of the killings, but no one, except for the man himself, knows who he is. Number 14, West Mesa Bone Collector. This killer is thought to be one person acting alone or several people connected to a group of some kind. Whatever or whoever is responsible, the remains of 11 women were found in 2009 in the desert of Albuquerque, New Mexico. The killings were committed between 2001 and 2005. The victims were between 15 and 32 years old, and most were Latina. Several of them were also involved in sex work and drugs. No official suspects have ever been named in connection with the murders. Number 15, the Zodiac Killer. When talking about unidentified serial killers, it would be foolish to leave out probably the most infamous one in recent history. Like Jack the Ripper, the Zodiac Killer sent cryptic messages and other items surrounding the murders he committed to the police. The Zodiac claimed to have killed 37, of which 5 had been confirmed people in total. It's believed that most of his crimes were committed in the late 1960s in San Francisco and Napa Valley. Several suspects have been brought forth, but no one has ever been apprehended.